The Insubordinate Map. Statement number 83. Statement giver Second Lieutenant Timothy Anderson. Experienced June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. Given June 6, 1946. Recorded by Edward Kane, the archivist. Statement begins. I apologize for being late for the appointment. I had to lock up the map to make sure it wouldn't do it again. I would appreciate if you didn't look at me like a crazy man. True, I saw my fair share of war several years back, but the clarity of my mind and my memory is intact. And before you ask, no, I am not on drugs of any kind, and I have not touched a sip of alcohol since I stormed the beaches with my platoon. You see, it won't let me drink now. Let me start from the beginning. As I've said, I fought in the war and was among the many that were to storm the beaches on that cursed day. I remember it almost not happening at all because of the terrible storms and weather, but when Churchill gave the order, no one among us was going to refuse the call. My primary designation during my time in the service had been navigating. It may not seem as important as manning the big guns or infiltrating the ice, but good luck doing either of those things without proper navigation. Truthfully, though, this journey was not a difficult one in my mind at the time. The journey across the Channel took anywhere from 11 to 35 hours, but I had done it before. My father ran a ferry system before the war, so I was quite familiar with the route. The most difficult and terrifying would be once we got to the shore and had to storm the German forts with us having little to no cover. I was incorrect. I remember our platoon was to be joined with a team of Americans who were also making the assault. Even though most of them had fought in Italy previously, they were quite green when compared to our troops. One thing that did strike me as odd was a corporal by the name of Oliver Pedito. He had glassy eyes, but not like those I had grown accustomed to seeing of soldiers tired and traumatized from fighting, but eyes that seemed at the same time to be constantly searching and scanning his environment. He gazed into my own eye, and looking at him I quickly averted my gaze. Something about his blank stare sent a shiver down my spine. I brushed it off and continued my work for several hours before we were sent to bed for the invasion the following day. This was the first time I saw the map. I was woken from my bunk on the ship by someone dropping their footlocker accidentally. When I opened my eyes to inspect the area, I saw Oliver standing over my navigation plans and weather charts in my footlocker with a curious and intrigued expression on his face. He must have again realized he was being watched and closed my footlocker and returned to his own bunk, though not of course before putting a map in my footlocker that was distinguishable by its old-looking brown paper. I rose from my bed curiously. Had he just wanted to verify my navigation plans? But then why would he place another map in my footlocker? It made little sense. I didn't want to risk waking up the rest of my platoon, and I wasn't keen on walking over to it, so I decided to quietly inspect my footlocker. I opened the latch as quietly as I could. I will regret that decision for the rest of my life. As I stared into the box, all my equipment and charts were in order, except for the new map. It was a map, the English Channel I saw, but there were scrawlings along the outside in some language I do not understand, and even to this day do not have the heart to research into. I became relieved as I thought Oliver was just simply trying to help me by providing an additional map of the channel. I went back to sleep and slept as well as any man could, who knew that they were about to face almost certain death when he awoke. The rest of the preparations are not worth mentioning, but it was once our sea craft launched from our larger ship with my platoon and the Americans that it happened. The craft propelled us towards the beaches as I had predicted. The weather made it extremely difficult to see as a deep fog settled over the waters. The fog became so thick that I could scarce even see the beach or hear the noises from the ships, till I couldn't at all. I could tell the other men on the craft were also becoming nervous as we didn't reach the shore and could no longer see it. All except Oliver kept his blank, searching expression that he always had. I pulled out the map, and what I saw made my heart sink deep into a pit in my stomach. Instead of the channel that I had seen the previous night on the map, I instead saw a map fully covered in water with no land. But the most concerning part was that there was a boat in the center with a perfectly drawn image of myself and everyone in my platoon on the sea craft. Above them, there was a text bar questioning in a sloppily written hand. "Are you lost?" I would have thought this enabled something, but what made a chill go down my spine was the ink was somehow still wet. It's hard to say how many days I spent out on the ocean with no sun to tell the days passing. We had several rations, but quickly ran out of water in our canteens, as man by confused man died of thirst until it was just Oliver, who still stared blankly and uncaring at our situation. I would have rather died to Germans on beaches than of thirst in a boat that was somehow in the middle of nowhere. I angrily jumped at Oliver's throat, who gave no defense to my sudden attack, but simply said the words that are still and forever will be burned into my mind. "Are you lost?" repeatedly until he expired. I was alone and out of food. I took my gun and was about to end my own life when the fog began to clear. I jumped from the ship and swam to the shore and found myself somewhere on the coast of I praised God for reaching the shore, but realized I still had the map in my pocket. I resolved to keep it tucked away, as I have to this day, so no one else has to go through what I did, what we did. And I suppose that is it. I dared not tell my superiors what happened, but simply told the ship had gone off course, and many men had either died or fallen off the ship once we reached the shores. I rejoined my company in Berlin for the final battles till D-Day, and my crew that died on the ship were written off as MIA, all except Oliver Pedito, who had no record of ever serving in the military. Statement ends. Follow-up required. Current residence in Western Isles of Scotland.